If you've ever played Jujutsu Shenanigans 1 vs. 1s, you probably already know that there's already a Binding Vow feature, available only in casual, where you can select one out of 3 options. However, certain Binding Vows, like the overtime one, which is based on the time of the match, is specifically made for the game mode. In this video, I'll be showcasing a concept which adds a whole new Binding Vow system made for the main game. Multiple characters. I'll also be announcing an early access giveaway later in the video, so make sure to stick around for that. Anyways, let's get right into the video. Quickly, let me go over what a Binding Vow actually is. In JJK, Binding Vows are restrictions applied to a sorcerer's ability in exchange for a boost, basically losing something to gain something. As an example, one Binding Vow, which would be only used on Hikari, would take place after his awakening ends. Normally, after you lose Jackpot, you gain 50% of your ultimate back by default. This first Binding Vow, Gambler, would instead completely randomize the percentage you get after losing Awakening. You could get a low percentage, which would be a bad roll, or have a 1 in 100 chance of just getting all your ultimate back. The negative of the Binding Vow would be that you have a chance to roll a bad number, but you also have the chance of rolling a large one, which would balance it both ways. You would be able to select this Binding Vow as well as others in a special menu screen. I tried to make a concept of what the screen would look like. You would be able to select Binding Vows to see what they do, and you'd be able to select them for your character on another screen, which you would be able to see on the left. In the series, revealing one of your Binding Vows boosts the power of them, so in order to see another person's Binding Vows, they would have to manually select revealing one's hand, which would reveal Binding Vows to players they hit, in exchange for something like more health or more damage. There could also be a Binding Vow for Gojo, called 6 Eyes, which would reveal Binding Vows that the other player has, but this time if you hit them. Another Binding Vow, which would apply to Gojo, Itadori, and Mahito, would apply a boost to their black flashes. After hitting a black flash, you would gain a status effect, which would boost damage by 20% for a few seconds after. In exchange, though, you would lose the ability to use your burst to get out of team attacks. You would be able to use this with any black flash move, and you wouldn't be able to land black flashes from the back with Itadori. This would balance it so that you wouldn't be able to boost the damage stacks with the burst, or do massive damage by chaining black flashes with Itadori. This third Binding Vow, called Cursed Technique Burnout, is based on a mechanic which actually happens in the manga. After characters use domain expansion in the series, they lose the ability to use their cursed technique when their barrier breaks. This Binding Vow would boost the effectiveness of domains. For example, for Gojo, it could make his domain last longer. For Sukuna, it could increase the damage by a bit. For Hikari, it could increase the odds slightly. For Mahito, it could increase his range of his lethal proximity. However, the downside would cause all moves that use a cursed technique would go on a long cooldown as a result. For example, after Mahito's domain ends, he won't be able to use any of his awakening moves, since they all require his cursed technique. He'd still be able to use his awakening black flash though, since it doesn't use his technique. Once his awakening ends, he'll only be able to use focus strike, since all the other ones use his cursed technique as well. Another Binding Vow, affecting domains, would be 0.2 domain expansions, which are both used in the series by Gojo and Mahito, but in-game could be applied to all domains. It would increase the range of the catch range and break instantly after forming. The effects would be reduced, but apply instantly. Sukuna's domain would deal a single chunk of damage instead of over time. Gojo's would stun everybody in the area for a reduced amount of time. Hikari's would play the intro sequence and freeze the player. Other players aren't frozen though, and if they hit the Hikari, then the domain is broken and they do not receive their jackpot. If they do complete the intro though, they get jackpot, but it decays quickly. Maybe to balance it, it could last longer if more people are caught in the domain, so that people don't run away and just pop the domain with nobody inside. Mahito's would damage and apply a status effect for a few seconds. Damage to them is amplified during the effect, and if idle transfiguration is used on them, it kills them instantly, even if they haven't been hit by it twice. This would also buff Mahito's ability, which auto-uses Idol Transfiguration, since he can use it on multiple people with the status effect. Near the end of the series, Sukuna and Gojo both use cursed chants to boost the power of their abilities. Sukuna already has a mechanic using chants that allows him to do his world-cutting slash, in exchange for putting all his moves on cooldown. This Binding Vow would allow you to amplify Gojo's Hollow Purple with chants, but would remove the invincibility frames you normally have when using it. You could also use it with Reversal Red Max, maybe in exchange for losing some ult bar or something. It could also be cool if you could chant while doing the nuke, for more damage in total, but more towards you. Before I continue with the Binding Vows though, I'll have to announce winners for the last early access giveaway, as well as announce the next one. Here are the winners from last video. I do one of these giveaways every long video, so make sure to check in when I announce these. I'll be giving away 3 more next video, so to enter, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment down what you think of Binding Vows in the main game. I appreciate all the support on my videos, and it allows me to keep doing these giveaways. Thank you guys, and let's get back to the video. Characters like Itadori and Megumi have lower health than normal characters, which could be because they have many tools for running. This Binding Vow would increase the amount of health they have back to 100, but lose mobility options. Megumi would have slower movement while in his special and lose the ability to fly on his Nue. Itadori would lose his aerial crushing blow, so that he can't run with it. This Binding Vow might be a bit too strong, but would counter high damage and one-shot moves. Every time you are hit by a move that deals more than half your health in one hit, you would survive on a small amount of health, no matter how high the damage is, as long as it is above around 50 damage. This would obviously only activate once per life, and leave you close to death. In exchange though, you lose the ability to block, leaving you vulnerable to dashes and any attacks, and wouldn't grant immunity to regular damage moves. This Binding Vow is similar to an already existing 1-in-1 vs. 1s, which increases mode gain, but doesn't allow you to use any attacks for 10 seconds. In main game, you would have increased ult gain by maybe 20%, but lose the ability to manually use it. Instead, you'd have to wait between 1 to 30 seconds for it to randomly be used, which could happen even if you aren't in a fight. You then wouldn't be able to use any moves for around 20 seconds, giving people the opportunity to kill you. This seems a bit underpowered, so maybe it could also increase damage done in your ult, since it leaves you vulnerable for a bit. Binding Vows might be a bit too complex for the game though, and since Jujutsu Shenanigans is already a bit more complicated than other Battlegrounds games, I can see why mechanics like these aren't added to the main game. If you enjoyed the suggestions though, please like and subscribe, as it really helps the channel out, and allows me to do more things like early access giveaways.